30 minutes to war. At 09:23 hours on June 14, 2025, a single dot blinked onto a U.S. cruiser's radar in the South China Sea. And for the next 30 minutes, two nuclear powers inched toward a war nobody actually wanted. What happened next explains why the world's most important shipping lane is still open, and why miscalculation is the scariest word at sea. Don't mess with the U.S. Navy. China learns the hard way. Open water, high stakes. The Nimitz Carrier Strike Group was exactly where international law says it can be. International waters, 180 nautical miles from the nearest Chinese territory, sailing a predictable course, broadcasting intentions and doing what American carriers have done for decades, keep sea lanes open. On any given year, roughly trillions of dollars in cargo transit these waters, container stacks of phones, medicine, machine parts, moving like clockwork because someone makes sure the clock keeps time. On the Ticonderoga-class cruiser USS Princeton, the Combat Information Center hummed at its usual disciplined tempo. The ship's SPY radar tracked merchant traffic, 40-plus commercial hulls within 50 miles, while watch teams updated the common operating picture shared across the group. Then the radar picture shifted. A Chinese Type 52D destroyer that had been loitering at distance kicked from 18 to 30 knots in under 90 seconds and bent its course straight toward the Americans. Contact and intent target classification came fast. Plan Luoyang 3, Type 052D, threat assessment moderate to high based on speed, heading, and weapons envelope. At her current pace, she'd hit weapons release range in minutes. Recommend general quarters, the tactical action officer said, already thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead. The captain glanced at the plot. The American voice was calm, not cocky. Hold for now. Let's see intent. It wasn't just steel against steel. A Singapore-flagged container ship loaded with semiconductors and a South Korean LNG tanker worth hundreds of millions rode these same lanes. Civilian lives and global supply chains threaded through the tactical geometry on the scope. Rules of engagement. In plain English. Rules of engagement are the legal and ethical breaks that keep professionals from turning tension into tragedy. A warship can track, shadow, and even point fire control sensors, but firing is limited to imminent threat or self-defense. In practice, that means identify, warn, maneuver, de-escalate where possible, and document everything. The net tightens. At 09:30, the strike group's cooperative engagement capability pushed the Chinese track to every ship and aircraft in real time. On the carrier, flight ops shifted with the precision of a watchmaker. The destroyers took station forward of the carrier, forming the moving bulwark that turns a rash shot into a one-way dive. High overhead, an E-2D Hawkeye swept its big dish and reported fresh tracks, multiple fighters lifting from Shandong, the Chinese carrier to the north. The signatures fit J-15 fighters, climbing hard and angling south. The air controllers noticed a limitation American crews trained to exploit. Ski jump launches often trade fuel or payload for deck simplicity. The J-15s would arrive with less endurance and fewer options if the dance turned rough. Electronic warfare demystified. The Navy fights in 5 domains at once: sea, air, undersea, space, and the electromagnetic spectrum. Enter the EA-18G Growler, a Super Hornet variant built to jam and deceive. Think of it like fog that you can spray onto enemy sensors. On the other side screens, solid tracks smear into noise, single aircraft split into ghosts, and radar locks break without warning. You rarely see electronic warfare. You feel it when your picture stops making sense. The third dimension, undersea. Sonar watch piped up. Possible diesel-electric submarine 80 miles off, acoustic signature consistent with a modern coastal boat. It was using layers and currents like a cloak, but it wasn't silent. No diesel-electric sub is when snorkeling. The Princeton's undersea team refined bearings and kept the contact boxed, quietly cataloging prop signatures and engine notes the way a detective collects fingerprints. This is where patience wins wars that never start. Flight Deck Thunder. Launch the division. Steam roared. Catapults sang. FA-18EF Super Hornets knifed skyward in 45-second intervals, while EA-18G Growlers and the E-2D took their own orbits. Each jet carried a network in its bones. Link 16, pumping shared sensor data across the formation. If one pilot saw a threat, all pilots saw it. American fighters built a layered wall, high cover at 35,000 feet, a mid-layer at 25,000, and a low element near 15,000, overlapping fields, mutual support, and no clean path through without entering somebody's weapons envelope. The first merges played out like a textbook. A Chinese fighter made an aggressive low-altitude pass, what pilots call a thump. The American wingman, Top Gun trained, rolled inverted, pulled into the bandit's 6 o'clock, and held a perfect firing solution for 3 long seconds. His helmet-mounted cueing showed the heat plumes of the other jet's engines bright on infrared. He didn't squeeze. Professional discipline over perfect geometry. One breath from shooting. Back at sea level, the Chinese destroyer crossed a line that, in any other era, might have prompted an immediate shot. Its fire control radar stopped searching and locked on the carrier. In naval terms, that's the electromagnetic equivalent of pointing a loaded weapon at someone's chest. On Princeton, checklists ran cold and clean. Firing solutions updated. SM-2, SM-6 interceptors sat ready in their cells. The cruiser needed no bluster to be lethal. The lock held for roughly half a minute, long enough to send a message, not long enough to violate the Americans' ROE. The illumination dropped. The Americans logged everything: frequencies, bearings, durations, evidence you only need if things go very wrong later. The submarine's message. Then came a quiet flex, the sort that doesn't splash headlines but changes minds. A Virginia-class attack submarine that had been shadowing the Chinese formation for days rose to periscope depth, drifted closer, and then, by design, surfaced within visual range of the Chinese carrier group. For 90 seconds, black hull and bright sun, water cascading off the sail, easy to see, photograph, and report. And then she slid back beneath the waves. Translation, without words: the undersea belongs to whoever can arrive unseen and leave at will. Fog and fuel. Reality. As the Growler settled into jamming orbits, the Chinese air picture turned to modern art. Ghost contacts bloomed, solid returns vanished, controllers hesitated, pilots burned fuel. Endurance became the enemy. One by one, the J-15s peeled off for recovery with bingo fuel warnings lighting up cockpits. They had flown hard to climb and push, and the math of fuel and distance isn't political, it's physics. Up high, American fighters held station with gas to spare and options in hand. No victory laps, no taunts, just a formation doing its job. Why this water matters. Zoom back out. A single choke point here can tilt global prices on everything from groceries to graphics cards. A single misjudged trigger can send insurance rates for shipping through the roof and slow economies on the other side of the planet. Freedom of navigation is not a slogan. It's the invisible scaffolding under modern life. The reason professionals are so boring on the radio is because the world pays a premium for boredom and predictability. De-escalation with dignity. By late afternoon, the tempo eased. Official statements later called it routine operations and scheduled training. Both sides kept their narratives. Both sides got what they actually needed. No incident. The Chinese destroyer bent away, The carrier group adjusted course to keep lanes clear for civilian shipping. Air wings recovered and reset. The common operating picture shrank from red-lined tension to the familiar clutter of tankers, bulkers, and box ships sliding along their routes. Off-camera, staff officers and diplomats did their quiet work. Log entries, debriefs, a handful of back-channel messages that let professionals on both sides say, "We saw you, we logged you, and we're moving on." Lessons, not chest beating. If this had turned kinetic, the opening 5 minutes would have been violent and decisive for anyone caught forward of the American wall. But that isn't the point. The point is that capability plus restraint is what keeps an accident from becoming an incident, and an incident from becoming a catastrophe. The US Navy trains to win fights and to avoid them when the mission is deterrence and assurance. The Chinese Navy trains too. Most days, both sets of professionals do their jobs and go home, precisely because they understand how fast the slope gets slippery. The final beat. At 16:23, the last Chinese fighters recovered aboard Shandong. The destroyer eased off the gas. The submarine contact faded back into the ocean's endless static. On Princeton, the CIC dimmed back to its steady-state glow, watchstanders rotating, coffee cooling on steel consoles. A single dot had blinked onto a screen and nearly pulled 2 nations over a cliff. Instead, nobody fired, and the world's most critical sea lane kept breathing. Containers stacked like city blocks, LNG chilled to glass, medicines packed in foam, all of it moving. Because crews on a handful of ships and jets chose judgment over ego. That is how a near war becomes nothing more than another black and white entry in a logbook, and how the ocean stays open for everyone who depends on it.
Your turn. If you want a deeper dive on carrier flight deck choreography, electronic deception, or how ROE is written and tested, tell us below. And if you've ever stood a watch on the bridge, in a CIC, or on a flight line, drop a comment with what the tension felt like. Stay safe out there.